Hello, Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the latest episode of the Magical Experiments podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be doing a solo monologue where I am talking about the power of letting go of willpower from magic. Now, if you are on YouTube, go ahead and please like and comment, subscribe, so you can get notified when my videos go up. If you are on Substack, please share, heart, and restack this, as this is cutting edge work that we're exploring. And anyone who's familiar with my work knows that Magical Experiments is about cutting edge innovation in magical practice across pop culture magic, space-time magic, inner alchemy, spirit work, and just the overall process of magic. And I'm going to be continuing to put out more material along those lines. And part of that comes right down to a fundamental reorientation around how I've practiced magic. In 2017, I had an experience where I was doing a lot of wealth magic, trying to force very specific results into place, and everything fell apart. Nothing worked, no matter what I did. And it felt like I was going up against a current. And it turned out that I actually was. That astrologically, I was going through a Neptune cycle. And it basically drowned me. I could not get things to work. I could not get the results that I wanted. Now, I know that a lot of people out there in the magical community will talk about how they get results all the time. And I do talk a fair amount about the successful results that I get. But anyone who knows me also knows that I talk about what doesn't work and why and when. And I do it from a place of taking responsibility. Like with the Neptune work, the honest truth is I was trying to fight against a current. And instead of looking at it and being like, I need to take this current and adapt it and work with it, no, I kept trying to push against it. And I was arrogant enough to think I could do it. And it was a really humbling lesson. I think that one of the most important things that we as magicians can do is take ownership of where we aren't always successful in our magical work. Because when we get into this idea that we always have to be successful, that's just playing a front game. And I'm not here for that. As a magical practitioner, I've done a lot of work over the years, and sometimes that work has worked out excellently, and sometimes it hasn't. Sometimes it has absolutely bombed. And I think it's really worthwhile to take a look at that and note that and be able to say hey, yeah, this is what's working and what isn't. This is how things have gone, and this is where it's really come together, and this is where it hasn't come together. So when I talk about this, I want to talk about one of the realizations that I had that fundamentally changed the way that I practiced magic. And this conversation in part came up because I've also been talking with my beloved, and I've asked her to read The Sphere of Art by R.J. Stewart, and so she's been reading it, and so she was asking me some questions about it, and we ended up having a dialogue back and forth about that, and it was really interesting. And one of the points of dialogue that kind of came up was when did you fundamentally change the way that you practiced your magic? Right? And when did you start practicing magic? And it was interesting because I've been quote unquote practicing magic for over 30 years, but as she said, she's like, well, really, I've been doing it all my life in some form or another. And she said at the same time, it's not, I don't even know if I would use that word practice. And I thought that's a fair point. I don't know that I would even use the word practice. It's just a very convenient word. And like her, I would say that if I'm being really looking at the span of my life, all 48 years, in one form or another, I've engaged in some form of spiritual practice, for lack of better word. So there's that aspect. And I'm kind of curious for those of you who are out there, how do you define what you do? Is a magical practice? Is it something else? Are we just using a word that is very convenient to use, or is there some other way that we would describe it? I'm going to come back to that as a theme later on down the line. because I think it's worthwhile to explore. Like, what is it that we're actually really doing? What does that mean? For purposes of this episode, though, what I want to talk about is the fundamental shift that I underwent. Back in 2017, I was doing all this magic to try and get my business at the time to really take off. I decided to do a deep dive into online marketing. What I hadn't realized with online marketing is that I needed to actually either A, be prepared to go into a lot of credit card debt, or B, like fundamentally have some money saved up for what I was going to be doing, which was online advertising. So I took these classes, which are really expensive, got involved with these marketing bros, and it changed the way I interacted with people. I became a bit of an asshole for a while. And I fully own that. Again, that was me. Like, I was trying to emulate these people, which really kind of just speaks to kind of like a lack of, I don't know, like kind of like a lack of integrity on my part, because I was trying to be like these people. And I recognize that now. I own it. It cost me a friendship. It cost me a couple of other things. And at one point I had someone who was a fan of my work who finally like wrote back and said, like, Taylor, I don't like who you are becoming. I'm not going to unsubscribe from your newsletter, and here's why. But like the way that you're going, I probably would unsubscribe if you continue going down this path. But I understand what you're trying to do, and I think like you need to like really take a pause. And I read that, and it was hard. And then I was like, this person's right. There's something being said here. And it was similar along the lines to something that my ex-friend had said to me as well. So I really had to sit with that and recognize, like, oh, the way that I'm showing up in the world is not like really in a good way. And that was the start of a journey that I'm on, that I'm continuing to be on. But it was the start of a journey that has fundamentally changed my life. In some great ways, in some ways that have been challenging. I would say that was kind of the root of it, because I realized that the problem that I had was that I was trying to brute force my way through magical work. I was trying to brute force results. And you might say, well, come on, Taylor, you've written How to Troubleshoot Magic and all that. One, I want to note that I wrote that book after that experience. But two, I want to note that like there's so much of a contemporary meme and an idea around will and magic. And it all comes back to Crowley, right? Magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Now, I don't know what Crowley really meant by will, and honestly, I could care less, because dude's dead and is irrelevant at this point. It has been for a long time. I know Thelemites might take exception to that, but like, why? Why are you still focusing on the written works of somebody who has almost been dead for almost 100 years now? I don't know. I don't get it. And I don't really care either. But what I do care about is the fact that word will has created a really interesting problem in contemporary occultism. And it's a problem where the idea is like, oh, like you can just kind of like force changes into place. You can force results into place and get what you want. I see it in contemporary chaos magic. I see it in a lot of other circles. I see it with grimoire magic. I see it just kind of like in general. Like this focus on, okay, it comes right down to the human being, the human person being the person who's going to command all the forces of the universe and force things to happen. And maybe that's not what Crowley meant. Who knows? Again, not really a concern of mine. But that word will, or, kind of ties into this psychological notion of willpower and the idea that, like, you can brute force things through willpower. Well, here's another hard truth. For the most part, willpower is not nearly as powerful as you think it is. It's part of your decision-making process, and if you have, we'll just say, made 5 decisions in the early morning from, like what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, are you going to stretch today or anything like that, and you haven't, like, created, like, a seamless flow, you're actually using up a lot of that willpower just to make those decisions, and every decision you make after that incrementally decreases the effectiveness of your will. And this is something that in modern magic we seem to have not picked up on. this goes really back to something I'll talk about more, which is like in another video, which is like the power of habit, and how habit, when it is integrated into magical work, can actually make your magical work a lot more effective. Again, we'll get into that in a later episode, but I think it's fundamentally significant that the way we do our magical work is it's powerful. It's powerful when we let go of will. And that's what I did. I realized that the will-based model of magical work was not working. Here I was trying to force my will on the universe back in 2017 and encountering a significant influence that was working against that, and I was not able to overcome it. I wasn't able to force it to work for me. I was not able to get what I wanted. It was a humbling lesson. It was a powerful lesson. It taught me a lot about like what I needed to change in magical work. And one of the things that I fundamentally started doing was looking at how I could draw upon the available influences to work with them instead of against them. And to, instead of trying to coerce things into place, working from a relational perspective. I'd already been doing the relational approach with spirits all along, but I had not been applying it in certain other ways. And I learned that. And one of the ways that I learned it was through reading The Sphere of Art by R.J. Stewart and fundamentally taking in those lessons and then applying it. And I felt fortunate that, at the time I was studying under RJ anyway, like starting to go in more deeply into some of his work. So it was a natural segue, but it really caused me to look at the idea that instead of trying to force my way onto things, that maybe what I needed to do was just change the fundamental orientation around how I think about magic. What I did is I started to look at it from the perspective of let go of will. I actually don't need to make will part of this equation. And I think that the will is actually an ego construct. Like, we want things to be a certain way. Now, some people will say, but Taylor, you're still doing results-based magic. Don't you want things to be a certain way? And I'm like, yeah, I still do results-based magic, although it's not as important now because a large part of it is actually more along the lines of a process approach to magic. I've started to really fundamentally look at the overarching process, and I treat the result as part of the process. I've talked about this before. And when I treat magic as a process, what it does is it fundamentally changes the way that I think about magic, because I'm not trying to get to a specific outcome as much as I'm trying to create an overarching process, what I call magic by design. And it's the idea that I'm trying to design my life overall. And again, not with like an attachment to a specific result. It's not applying will. It's more along the lines of I have a sense as to how I would like my life to unfold. And I am willing to put into place the necessary pieces to get me where I want to go. And I recognize that there's going to always be unknown variables, and that the ideal thing is to approach this from a place of event plus response equals outcome. There's an event. I choose how I respond. I operate from a place of choice, not necessarily from will, but just like, how do I want to respond? How do I choose this response? And then I use that to help create the outcome, with the understanding that the outcome will necessarily change the rest of the process, and that there's this continual iterative flow between process and outcome that affects the overall experience and allows me to gradually change and transform the experience in a very powerful way. When we look at magic from this perspective, what we're really looking at is letting go of like an I-centered approach to magic and kind of creating a collaborative approach to magic, which really factors in everything around you and makes it part of the equation and is open to the influences of whatever is around me in a way that says kind of like, okay, these influences might have more information, might have something I need to know, and this could steer and transform the way that I do this magical work. So I let go of will. And part of this was through learning the sphere of art practice and starting to do it every day. And this was really about kind of the sphere of art practice was essentially a surrendering of my own sense of entitlement, of will, of this idea, and saying like, okay, I'm going to create a specific space with the help of the archangels, the spirits that I'm working with, and it's going to be a space that's outside of the normal space-time continuum. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring into that space like the overall design, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially put everything into place, connect with, and use it to connect with what is outside of the sphere, and kind of direct and shape it, but do it in a way where it's collaborative with the forces that are within, and it's open to receiving the information. And I'm not attached to the outcome. Instead, I'm kind of like a person that's on a stream, and I'm in a boat, and I'm paddling when I need to, and then I'm stopping when I don't, and letting the current carry me where I need to go. And when I do need to paddle, it's usually kind of like, okay, how can I paddle with the least amount of effort? Not about will, it's about creating an overall experience where I just gradually move my way into the overall desired result, and I'm open to letting go of the need to know. And I think this is kind of the difference, really, is that like with will based magic, it's kind of like, well, I need to know where things are going. I need to know how things are going to happen in a way. And this is interesting because I also talk about like the concept of understanding magical work, and I'm definitely not a fan of the you don't need to know how magic works crowd. I don't believe in that. But it's more along the lines of, when I say like understanding how magic works, it's like understanding how, okay, I have this influence here. I'm coming into play with it. I don't necessarily know all the answers, but I can contact that influence, connect with it, and kind of have a back and forth, and then make adjustments and changes. Whereas if I don't even know what I'm doing, then I'm kind of operating in a place where it's kind of like the Titanic hitting an iceberg, and yeah, maybe hoping that the iceberg doesn't sink the Titanic. Well, we already know what's going to happen there, don't we? So when we talk about this idea of letting go of will, it's essentially letting go of the need from an ego perspective to have control, to be like it has to be this way. Instead, it's like, okay, I'm gonna bring what I want to these different influences. I'm going to work with these influences. I'm going to be open to the information they receive, and I'm going to adjust and adapt to the circumstances that come my way. I'm going to accept and be curious about the unknown. I don't have to try and force things to conform with my ideal state of reality. Instead, what I can do is I can adjust and adapt to what is coming my way and turn that into an asset that works for me and with me to help create the reality that I want, with the understanding that even the creation of that reality is going to bring new changes. It's also looking at the idea that we're not just looking at the result itself, we're looking at what comes beyond the result. Because again, a lot of times what I see is I see this focus where it's kind of like, okay, you hit the result. Okay, great. And then that's it. You're done. But it's like people who do money magic, right? I'm doing money magic in order to get a result with that money. Like, I want to get so much money, but it's, you want to do more than just get money. Like, if you say, oh, I need $500, well, what do you need $500 for? I need $500 for the rent. Okay, now we know what you need it for. That's what you're really going for. You're not going for $500. You're going for, I need to be able to pay rent this month, as an example. And I think when we look at magic from that way, we kind of we can let go of the will, because the will is kind of based on this very short-term kind of grasping toward, well, I need $500. And an approach that is not will-based magic is really based around the idea of, I know what I'm shooting for, an overall design. I know what that design is. I know where I want it to go. And I also know there's going to be ripple effects coming out of that. And I'm going to factor those in as well in order to keep things on course. But I'm going to do it from a place of the choiceless choice. Like, I'm letting go of the ego. I'm letting go of the idea that I need to have things be a certain way. And instead, I'm actually just adapting to how things are. and working with them, and then using that to help gradually steer me toward where I want to go. So we'll be talking about this more in future episodes, but this is kind of an exploration of that, and thought a little bit of history on my part. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.